Hey, what's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today, gonna do the breakdown video for Jaime Minguia versus Gabriel Rosado. That fight takes place Saturday, November 13th. It's on DAZN. It's a bout that's being contested at 160 pounds middleweight. And it's a pretty big matchup right here. You got Munguia, who right now I have him comfortably at like number 4 or 5 at middleweight 160. I believe I have him at number 5 behind Erislandy Lara. He's a former champ at 154. He's the favorite coming into this fight. 25 years old, 37-0, 30 knockouts. He is, has a lot of promise right here. Golden Boy really wants Munguia to be a standout star. He's got power, really good power, and he can box a little bit. He's getting better as he progresses his career. Going against Gabriel Rosado, the pretty much blood and guts warrior veteran right here, who just doesn't seem to go away. I mean, this guy is just, he's 35 years old. He's a former world title challenger, but he just continues to be a competitor. He's been competing at 168 recently, and he is just still a major threat, and he's a name, and Munguia's choosing this fight to try to move up the ladder at 160, but it was a easily makeable fight as well. He had an opportunity, Munguia did, to fight Sergey Derevyanchenko, but Derevyanchenko's coming off of consecutive losses, to top-level middleweights, mind you. But Munguia wanted to fight Rosado, who's coming off of a big upset win, in a strong performance against Daniel Jacobs last year, which we'll get into. But it's a big middleweight fight right here, and I think it's going to be an entertaining one. I really do. I think their styles clash is going to be a good one to watch. So it's Saturday, November 13th on DAZN. It's going to be a good one. If you haven't seen my breakdown videos before, basically I start with the favorite, and I do what he's done coming into this fight, how he's rolling into the fight. Usually I touch on their last couple years or their last 3 fights. Then we talk about, what they have to do to win the fight, what kind of style they have to have. Can they win by knockout? Can they win by decision? I ask, what does it mean for them if they win or lose? What does it mean for boxing if they win or lose? And then I flip it over to the underdog and talk about them. And then after that, I discuss who I think is going to win the fight. So let's jump into this one right here. Taking place in a few weeks, and it should be good. So we start with the favorite, Jaime Minguia. Undefeated, as I said, 37-0. He's 25 years old. He's a former champ at 154. His last 3 fights are all his fights at middleweight since he moved up to the middleweight division. His last fight was in June when he main evented, and he stopped Kamil Ziramita, which some can argue was, arguably his best win at middleweight. And the reason I say that is he took Ziramita took the fight on about, I think, 2 weeks' notice. He was supposed to fight Maciej Sulecki, and he took on Ziramita, who had went 7 rounds with Triple G in December of last year. He got stopped in that fight. Ziramita is a durable middleweight, but not a lot of punching power. But Munguia stopped him in 6 rounds on short notice. So, that really, if you're comparing opponents, obviously styles make fights. But if you're comparing opponents, hey, Munguia did a little bit better than Triple G did, and on short notice. So that was a good win. Prior to that, last year he took on Toriano Johnson and stopped him when he busted Johnson's lip badly, where it was sliced down the middle in a pretty even fight, slugfest. They were going at it. He did that, and then prior to that, he stopped Spike O'Sullivan, impressively in the 11th round when he faced some adversity in that fight. He had to start boxing. He got hurt bad in the 2nd round, but he fought through that, faced the adversity, battled back, and ended up stopping O'Sullivan in the 11th round of that spirited contest right there. So Munguia, he's been successful at middleweight so far. He's 3-0. He seems to be rolling. Now he's taking on the veteran Rosado. Now Munguia, I really think he's keeping himself busy against solid competition ahead of vying for the vacant belt, because he's having trouble getting the fight with Jermall Charlo, who's a champ at 160. The fight can be made. The WBC mandates the fight, it gets made. But I really think DAZN and Golden Boy want to get the fight, on their network. And Charlo, we don't know how willing he is to accept that fight also. So unless that fight gets mandated, Charlo might not be, ready to go. Plus, Charlo is flirting with moving up to 168 soon. So if all that takes place, then Munguia would be able to fight for the vacant belt. He's also number one though in the WBO, and that title's currently held by Demetrius Andre. Now, I don't know if he wants to fight Andre all that bad. That fight is possible. He can get it if he wants it, because Andre's looking to beat anybody, looking to fight and beat anybody, but he's got to want that fight. Andre is also flirting with moving up to 168, so then he could slide right in and fight for the WBO title, the vacant WBO title. But I'm hoping after this one, if he gets through Gabriel Rosado, which is not a guarantee, I'm hoping he's going after a world title. I think Munguia is hungry. He's anxious to prove himself, and Gabriel Rosado is a good, solid-ass opponent to do that against. He's a good name to get on your resume. He upset, he fought his ass off the last 2 times out at 168, and he's really here. He's a good measuring stick opponent. He's kind of your gatekeeper, and Munguia can really keep himself rolling, beating a good, solid veteran like Rosado here. So I think he needs to come out, have the same kind of approach that he's been having. What kind of style does he need to have? He needs to box his way in. I think Rosado might try to box him, stand back and box him a little bit and let Munguia come to him and set himself up. What he needs to do is see how good of a shape Rosado's in, since Rosado's cutting down to 160 again to fight. And I think he needs to go on a body attack on Rosado. I really think that's going to be successful. Jab his way in, body attack. Don't just get into a slugfest, but test Rosado out. See how Rosado handles his power. Try to bust Rosado up and open him up. I think that's the kind of fight Munguia needs to have, is box and punch in this fight, but don't walk into anything, because we saw what happened to Bektemir Melikuziev in Rosado's last fight. And, also, though, don't let Rosado turn it into a boxing match. Don't be chasing Rosado around the ring as Rosado tries to counterpunch. Cut the ring off. Rosado is not a master technician. He's learning some new things, but he's not a master technician where he can totally avoid Munguia in this fight. Munguia needs to be smart, cut the ring off, box, set up his punches, and when he gets Rosado against the ropes or on the inside, bust Rosado's body up to the head, not head to the body. That's the kind of fight I think Munguia needs to have to win this one. Can Munguia win by knockout? Absolutely, I think he can win by knockout. One punch knockout's going to be tough, because Rosado is a tough-ass fighter. He's a good, tough fighter. He can take shots. He's been hit hard before. He's been knocked out before. But the guy always bounces back and is tough as hell. And I think Munguia just needs to break Rosado down to try to knock him out. He doesn't need to go for the knockout early, even though he has the kind of power to end the fight early. But I think he needs to, a knockout can come if he breaks him down and stops him. But I think a knockout can come either way if Munguia times his shots right and lands the big shots. But yeah, I definitely think he can win by knockout. Can Munguia win a decision? I think so. But, don't get drawn into a boxing match. He needs to make it a boxing, punching type style. He needs to be able to box when he needs to box, but set up those big bombs and those big shots, use his youth, and don't get drawn into the trenches and, where he's chasing and he gets tired late in the fight, because that could affect the decision. But I think Munguia can win a decision. I think he can win a clean decision. I think it could be close with Rosado. I think it could go either way, because Rosado's a talented guy. He's a solid fighter. Now, what does it mean for Jaime Minguia if he wins this fight? It's huge. It keeps his star rolling. It puts him at 38-0, you know, and keeps him rolling. How he wins is going to be important, but I don't think if he beats Rosado by a decision, I don't think that's going to go too much against him, but it's got to be convincing. If he fights a close fight with Rosado, I don't know if that helps Munguia. So he needs to go out there, he needs to be convincing, whether it be by knockout, whether it be by decision. I don't think people are going to be surprised either way, but he needs to try to get Rosado out of there. Now, obviously, he needs to try for that, but a win is a win, and Rosado's a tough guy who's been 12 plenty of times before, so he doesn't need to force a knockout and get caught. But he definitely, it's definitely going to be big for Munguia if he wins this fight. It keeps him in line for world titles, keeps his star pushing forward. What does it mean for Munguia if he loses this fight? Well, it's going to hurt him badly. You know, he's 25 years old, and he wants to prove that he's on that elite level. He wants to get to that elite level, and beating a gatekeeper like Gabriel Rosado is important to that. If he loses, people are going to think he's overrated or not on the level of Charlo, Andre, you know, Triple G, all those kind of guys, you know, and he's close to landing one of those fights if he wants it. You know, he was negotiating with Triple G earlier this year. That might be an option for him next year. But Charlo's there, Andre's there. There's guys, you know, that has the ability to fight, and he's right near that top 5 level, and he needs to continue to win. So a loss is going to hurt him against Rosado. It's going to definitely hurt him. What does it mean for boxing if Munguia wins? Well, it's big for boxing because there's a lot of young, good talent right now that is undefeated, that is going to carry the next decade of boxing for us, and Munguia is one of those stars that are on the rise, you know, and it's big for boxing if a guy like Munguia wins. What does it mean for boxing if Munguia loses? It's going to hurt boxing because, as I said, he's a big, you know, he's a star on the rise, but I don't think it's going to devastate boxing because he's not on like a David Benavidez level, who's a little bit further along and a little more convincing, and people are a little more sure about Benavidez. He's a little bit more of a star. But Munguia can get to that level. It's just he's not there yet. So if he loses, I don't think people are going to be like shocked because he were to lose to Rosado. But it does hurt boxing a little bit if a guy like Munguia loses. So now we're going to switch over to Gabriel Rosado, the underdog, former world title challenger. And look at what he's done rolling into this fight. Well, since he moved back to 168, he's been successful. You know, a couple years ago, he took on Maciej Sulecki at 160. And it was right before Sulecki got the title shot with Demetrius Andre. And Sulecki was pretty much outboxing him and outworking him. Put him down a couple times, and then boom, he almost knocked Sulecki out late in the fight. You know, he hurt him badly, put him down twice in the 9th round. Sulecki had to hold on in the 10th. Rosado proved, again, hey, I'm still here. I can still bang with people. You know, a little bit prior to that, he had a split draw with Luis Arias, who just beat Jarrett Hurd, you know? So he's a good, solid fighter still, is Rosado. And then the last 2 fights, he showed everybody why. He took on Daniel Jacobs last year in November, and a lot of people think he won that fight. That was a controversial decision. It ended by a split decision in favor of Jacobs because Rosado decided to box Jacobs and stay back in boxing. Jacobs was expecting a different fight, and Rosado forced Jacobs to come forward the whole fight pretty much. It was kind of a dull, boring fight, but Rosado boxed and he did well. There's a lot of people that thought he won that fight. So, you know, it's going to be, he did well against a top-tier fighter right there. And then in his last fight, he took on Bektemir Melikuziev and came in as the opponent. Melikuziev was 7-0 with 7 knockouts. He was the guy that was supposed to fight Sergey Kovalev earlier in the year at 175, so it's kind of a big super middleweight. And he hurt Rosado, put him down at the end of the 1st round, and then in the 3rd round, Melikuziev walked into a fucking wicked right hand that is a knockout of the year candidate, and face planted Melikuziev, knocked him out, pulled off the upset. That was on the undercard of Munguia and Zaramita, and the talk started right then and there that Munguia and Rosado should fight each other, and now they are. So Rosado is no stranger to the middleweight division. Coming back down to 160, he's always in good, solid shape. So So I don't think that's going to be too much on him. But at the older age and at the age of 35, you never know. But he is not afraid coming in as the underdog, coming in as the opponent. He relishes in that spotlight. He's been that his whole career. He's a modern day, in my opinion, he's a modern day Arturo Gatti kind of deal. He's always busted up, getting cut, but banging and fighting. And he's kind of decided to box in his last couple fights and counterpunch, and it's worked out for him. So coming into this fight, what kind of fight does he need to have? If he can force Munguia into that style of fight to where he's standing back boxing, it could benefit him. He needs to be able to keep the younger Munguia off of him, but that side to side, using the angles and counterpunching, if he could catch Munguia, he's got the power to hurt Munguia. He does. This is a guy that has fought at 168, and he can fight at 160, and I think he's got power that he could affect Jaime Minguia for sure and possibly hurt him. And that's what he needs to be trying to do. But he doesn't need to look for one punch. He needs to try to legitimately outbox and beat Jaime Minguia. But he does not need to get into a slugfest with Munguia. He really doesn't. He doesn't have the speed, and he doesn't have the power to keep up with Munguia like that. So that doesn't need to be his style. But he needs to try to draw Munguia into a boxing match. If he can do that, he could have success and possibly pull off another upset here and keep his star rising between 160 and 168, and that's exactly what he wants, and keep those bigger fights rolling in. So that's the kind of fight Rosado needs to have. Now, can Rosado win this fight by knockout? I think he can. I think Rosado has a decent enough power to hurt Munguia and stop him if he catches him. You know, he does have that kind of power. And then I think Rosado has the kind of style that if he can get Munguia moving a lot, take him into the deep waters, and he's landing good enough shots, he could possibly wear the youngster down and stop him. So yeah, I think he could win by knockout. Can he win by decision? Yeah, I mean, again, if he draws him into a boxing match, that's going to be big for him. Rosado has gotten better as a boxer, and if he draws him into a boxing match, he definitely can pull off the upset. You know, a lot of people think he beat Daniel Jacobs, as I said, so it's possible for him to beat a young rising star like Jaime Minguia. Now, what does it mean for Gabe Rosado if he beats Jaime Minguia? It's huge for Rosado. You know, honestly, he can stay at 160, and a title fight should be next. He could possibly get Demetrius Andrade in the ring, for sure. Maybe, you know, I doubt he gets Triple G again, but Rosado, again, can move up to 168 without an issue and possibly get, you know, somebody at 168 to give him a crack to get in line for a world title. You know, we know Canelo's competing against Caleb Plant for the undisputed title next, so he might not get a title shot, but it keeps his star rising and keeps him getting those bigger money fights that he wants. Like, Gabe Rosado's a baller. He wants to get those big money fights, take on the good, solid opponents that lead to a big money fight after. So it just keeps his star rolling in the right direction. To get a notch on his belt like Munguia totally turns attention back to Rosado, and guys are going to want to fight him. Rosado is your consummate gatekeeper right now between 160 and 168. He's one of those veterans that have been there and has done that you want to get on your resume. You want to get that name. So he pulls off an upset that's only going to draw more of the top tier talent to want to fight him. What does it mean for Rosado if he loses? Well, depends on how he loses. If Munguia goes out there and beats the shit out of Gabe Rosado and stops him, you know, or dominates him over 12 rounds, then he's pretty much just going to stay where he's at or take another step back. You know, he's getting up at that older age. I don't think people are going to be shocked if something like that happens, and, you know, you're just like, well, whatever. You know, he continues to be a gatekeeper. Maybe he gets beat down to where, you know, he might be calling it quits at some point soon. But, you know, I don't know if I see that kind of loss for him if he were to lose this fight. But if it happens, I mean, it's not going to hurt his career too bad. It's just going to force him into reconsidering whether he belongs at the top or on that level anymore, you know, and it is going to make him question things. So yeah, it'll hurt him, but I don't think it's going to devastate him. He's lost plenty of fights. He's lost, what, I think 11 or 12 fights in his career. So it's not going to devastate his career by any means. So he really, in all essence, has nothing to lose. Very little to lose. What does it mean for boxing if Gabe Rosado wins? Well, you know, obviously it's worse for boxing if Gabe Rosado wins because he's a veteran, been there, done that, and I think we know what we're going to get if he fights at the top level. But with Jaime Minguia, we don't know yet. We don't know what we're going to get, and that keeps people wanting to see the younger guys like Munguia. So it's going to hurt boxing a little bit if Rosado wins, but it's going to be a good story. You know, it is. That helps too. So, you know, it's you take your positive and your negatives, you know. You're always going to have a positive out of every situation, and Rosado pulling off an upset is still a good story, even though it might hurt boxing overall a little bit. And what does it mean for boxing if he loses? It's not going to hurt boxing if he loses. It's going to be better for boxing if Munguia wins this fight. But, you know, it's not going to hurt boxing if Rosado loses. I don't think a lot of people are expecting him to win the fight. But, so, it's not going to hurt boxing too bad if Rosado at 35 doesn't win this fight. So, my prediction, who do I think is going to win the fight between Jaime Minguia and Gabriel Rosado? And to be honest, I'm going with Jaime Minguia. I think Munguia is starting to figure out, and this is since the Spike O'Sullivan fight, to be honest with you, that he's got a solid, stiff jab. And if he continues to work on that jab, and also look at Canelo, how good Canelo is as a boxer and a puncher. If you learn to have that style and you're not just a brawler and a slugger, you could be successful. You know, especially with the kind of power that Munguia has. So I think Munguia is going to be smart in this one. I think he is going to cut the ring off of Rosado. I think dropping from 168 to 160 for Rosado in only 4 months' time can have an effect, or 5 months' time can have an effect. And I think Munguia is going to go in there. I think he's going to break down Rosado. I think he stops him in the late rounds, or it goes to a decision and he wins a clean decision. But I think Rosado, even at 35, is a veteran. He's been there. He's done that. He's very live underdog. And I think he could also pull off the upset. I wouldn't be surprised. So we'll see what happens. But that's the breakdown for Munguia and Rosado. Again, Saturday, November 13th on DAZN. Middleweight contest. I hope you guys enjoyed this. True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.